Hello and welcome to this week's edition of World Today, your weekly dose of top international stories. Let us begin with the midterm polls in the United States of America. Many election pundits predicted that the Republicans will fare rather well in the midterms, but that was not to be. Forget about a red wave. Many analysts called it a red ripple, a red splash, drizzle, sprinkler, but certainly not a wave. While the Democrats are happy about not doing so badly, they stand to lose control of the House and maybe even the Senate. Let us look at the numbers first and then analyze the reasons. Now, here at the US midterm elections, there are two battles that are on. One is the battle for the House of Representatives, which has about 435 seats, and we'll talk about the numbers and how the Republicans and the Democrats fared. The second big battle is the battle for the Senate. The Senate has about 100 seats, of which 35 seats went to polls. Again, we'll see the numbers, but it's the majority mark that is more important. At the House of Representatives over here, we are looking at a 218 mark to have majority in the House of Representatives. What we're looking at is not just the wins, but also the leads. And according to the leads, it's the Republicans who might end up with a 220 or more, which means they're crossing the majority mark and could wrest control of the House of Representatives. It has huge repercussions. We'll talk about that. But let's take a look at the Senate. Now, at the Senate, there are 35 seats that are up for polls, but you need 51 to have majority in the House. Now, what we're looking at is, with the wins and the leads, both sides have secured 48. There are three very important states, Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, that are up for grabs. A tough fight over there, but we're also told that Georgia will be going for a runoff in December. So the clincher would be whether if Republicans get Georgia or Democrats, and that's the one which will land majority at the Senate. So that's how the play is going to be. Now, while the Democrats and the Republicans both are pleased with their performance, there is one person for whom this could be the beginning of a second end. For Donald Trump, these elections were a disaster. All the candidates he endorsed were rejected by the voters, paving the way for DeSantis to become the undisputed face of the Republicans for the presidential race in 2024.
I've never been more optimistic about America's future than today.
The midterm elections in the US has cemented the idea that the country is a divided house. A perfect reflection of a polarized nation that mistrusts its leaders and isn't ready to unite on a new path. While many believed that the Republicans would sweep the midterms, the Democrats managed to contain the red wave.
It was a good day, I think, for democracy. And I think it was a good day for America. While the press and the pundits are predicting a giant red wave, it didn't happen.
With the Republicans crawling to the 218 mark in the House and expectations of clinching 220 seats, the House of Representatives will have a new Republican speaker. A wafer-thin House Republican advantage would be volatile as extreme lawmakers would wield disproportionate power in the House. A few defections by moderates could meanwhile end the party's capacity to pass bills.
The Democrats have lost the House, right? Republicans will make them tough to rule the country for the next 2 years. So there's going to be increasingly political dysfunctionality in this country. Had they got majority, the Democrats had maintained majority, the things would have been much better in this country.
At the Senate, control still hangs in the balance with undecided Arizona and Nevada races.
Let's sing one more time. Let's build a Georgia that...
Even as Georgia's contest heads to a December 6 runoff. If the Republicans breach the 51-seat mark, then Biden's key appointments, whether if it is ambassadors or judges, will never see the light of day. Most expected inflation would trump everything, including concerns about the loss of abortion rights, leaving many Democrats pleasantly surprised with the wins.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of big things happening in the world at all times, but currently, particularly as a woman, protecting reproductive rights in all forms in this state and federally is the most important thing that's been driving me and a lot of my friends, and I think has really pushed a lot of us to get friends who maybe wouldn't have voted, or get people to kind of look into who they're voting for, why they're voting for them, and really protecting our basic human rights.
But the larger picture is what will happen in 2024 presidential elections. Did the Democrats win because of performance or because of infighting within the Republican Party? The country not only were electing lawmakers, but also governors across the country. Donald Trump's bet noir, Ron DeSantis, won handsomely in Florida.
And we have such a good opportunity to bring more investment to Florida, Mr. President. I just want you to know, when I become governor, I'm going to go to Don Jr. and Eric, and I'm going to try to bring the Trump organization to Palm Beach. We can save you a lot of money.
Trump ended a sore loser with all the candidates that he endorsed being rejected by the voters, indicating exhaustion with the kind of chaos fomented by the former Republican president, raising questions about the viability of possible run for the White House in 2024.
Yeah, we're putting them up. We're winning big, big, big in the Republican Party for the nomination like nobody's ever seen before. Let's see, there it is, Trump at 71, Ron DeSanctimonious at 10%, Mike Pence at 7%. Oh, Mike's doing better than I thought. Liz Cheney, there's no way she's at 4%.
But now it seems like the chamber effectively will be split down the middle and locked in an angry stalemate, like America itself.
On Spotlight this weekend, we have with us from D.C. Lisa Curtis, a politician, former member of the National Security Council, and now at the Center for New American Security. Also joining me is Jason Isaacson, who is Chief Policy Officer at the American Jewish Committee. Lisa and Jason, many thanks for joining us here on India Today. Let's begin with the numbers. It seems like there is jubilation when it comes to the Democratic Party, but and no red wave, so to say. But are there reasons for them to be happy at a point in time when they're poised to lose a majority in the House of Representatives?
First of all, it's good to see you again. There is reason to, of course, celebrate the fact that it wasn't the blowout that many people had predicted and that polls suggested. But it will be tough going forward with the House, as is likely to be the case, although, as you know, there are still votes to be counted. It's still not decided, but likely to be the case that Republicans will take control narrowly of the House of Representatives. Likely the Democrats will hang on again by their fingernails to control of the Senate, but that also is not yet decided. If that is the case, if you have a Democratic president and a Congress that is at least one of the chambers in the control of the opposing party, it will be tough going on many legislative matters. There are some essential things that will happen. Most of the Biden legislative agenda will be frozen. And so, you know, they can celebrate the fact that it wasn't a blowout. They can celebrate the fact that historically, in every election since the second term of Franklin Roosevelt in the 1930s, every election, the party in power has lost seats in the House, except for two instances, right. One during President Bush's first term and one during President Obama's second term. But every other one they've lost, and sometimes 40, 50, 60 seats. If they lose, a dozen seats this time overall, that'll be quite good when people were expecting far worse. It may even be fewer than that. It may be that Republicans will take control of the House by just under 10 seats, well, maybe just a couple. So again, we're waiting to see. It will be tough going forward, however it turns out, because it'll be very close majorities. Whoever wins, And you see what happens when you have a closely divided chamber. Extremists tend to have more control over their party leadership and can gum up the works. We saw that a lot in this last Congress that's just ending. It will certainly be the case in the next Congress.
Lisa, what is your reading on why didn't the Republicans really perform? Is this a result of Republicans not having done or performed well enough, or maybe a verdict on Donald Trump, given that all those he backed really didn't make it?
Well, thank you. And just to make a correction, I've never been a politician. I'm a foreign policy expert at a think tank and formerly with the National Security Council. But I think that Democrats were able to use the anti-abortion stance of Republicans and the threat to democracy brought by the attack on the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, to hold their own and beat some of the more extreme candidates on the right. Some of the early polls are showing that both threats to democracy and inflation were top issues for voters. And of course, one governor called this election boring wins. This was the election of boring wins, meaning that populism, political performance did not rule the day, that several establishment candidates actually won their elections. We still don't know, of course, who will control the House or the Senate. As we just heard, it's highly likely Republicans will take the House. And on the Senate side, of course, it's coming down to 3 races in Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, where we'll have a runoff in December. But I do think that the most significant aspect of this election is what it says about Donald Trump. It was, in a sense, a rebuke of Trump and his focus on denying the results of the 2020 election. The 5 Republicans that Trump endorsed in the House all lost their elections. And high-profile governors that Trump had endorsed lost to their Democratic rivals, such as Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan and Katie Hobbs in Arizona. So I think, 2 things stand out, that, the establishment candidates did well, and many of these extreme right candidates that Trump had endorsed did not do so well. And so this could be a time of change in the Republican Party. And I think the question is whether Republicans will blame Trump and start to distance themselves so that he doesn't have that firm lock on the party that he's had over the last several years. But only time will tell. He has been resilient in the past. He's bounced back. So this could just be a moment in time.
Well, before I go back to Jason, Lisa, just another question. The fact that Donald Trump has a huge and strong control over certain Republicans, Ron DeSantis, how do you see him now, the fact that the win has been huge, and he certainly is being looked at as somebody who would or could lead the Republicans into the presidential race of 2024?
Certainly it was good news for Ron DeSantis. He did spectacularly well in his race for re-election. Not that it was a huge contest, but he did overperform. Florida is now a decidedly red state, whereas it wasn't so very long ago that it was a swing state. And he gets a lot of credit for that. So yeah, he is the guy to watch. Now, having said that, I'll also remind you and our viewers that we've been pretty bad at predicting who is going to be the front runner after midterm elections for the next presidential contest. So DeSantis looks quite strong right now. Trump has taken some hits in this election. Trump may announce for president next week. He's been suggesting, dropping hints that was coming very soon. DeSantis is popular widely, and he, of course, has done a fair amount of traveling and fundraising around the country. People are starting to line up. But there may be other Republican governors and members of Congress who will emerge over the coming weeks, or business people as well.
Okay, I'll take
DeSantis is the horse to watch right now, but there may be others, lining up.
Let me just take the same question to Lisa. Lisa, what do you see? How do you see Ron DeSantis over here, his position, and will he now be looking at leading the Republicans, or may have a chance at the primaries?
Well, I think he's certainly seen as the widely supportive potential alternative to Trump. That's true. And he won very big, 20-point margin. That's huge. So, it is looking like he could be a potential alternative to Trump in 2024. Of course, he was just elected governor, so he's going to focus on, governing his state for the time being. But I certainly think that's in many people's minds that, look how well he did in an election where we didn't see the red wave. The Republicans didn't do as well as they had hoped or expected, but yet he, trounced his opponent. So, yeah, he's looking like definitely like a potential presidential candidate in 2024.
Right. Lisa, again, you have been a part of the Security Council in the past. Now, for somebody who knows the importance of where to and what's the strategic play out here when it comes to the Russia-Ukraine war, should McCarthy become Speaker, he's opposed to the idea of continuing funding to Ukraine in this war against Russia. How do you see then the United States of America position itself when the Speaker would be opposed to the idea of funding Ukraine?
Yes, let me first make a broad point here on foreign policy. There's been a lot of doubt in the minds of our friends and allies overseas about the future of American democracy, given the events on January 6th, the attack on the U.S. Capitol. But I think what this election, the message that this election sends is that American democracy is alive and well. The people are choosing, their voices are heard, and they care about, regular issues. So I think that's an important message that is sent to the world about American democracy. On the issue of Russia, I really don't expect to see much change, even if the Republicans take the House as expected. Certainly there's been this conservative wing in the Republican Party that has supported limiting aid to Ukraine, but there's a lot of contradictions in this position, because on the one hand, Republicans support a strong United States. They want to show leadership in the world. So it doesn't make much sense to cut off the Ukrainians, especially when the Ukrainians are actually doing well in this war. The Russians just pulled out of Kherson. So it shows that to some degree, U.S. Military aid to the Ukrainians is helping them to succeed and push back against Russian aggression. So it really is not a time to be thinking about cutting aid to Ukraine. And the second point is that, we just discussed how a lot of the extreme candidates lost their elections on the Republican side. And so I think that also dictates against this really strong support.
Now, world's biggest football tournament, FIFA 2022, is not less than 2 weeks away, and the host country, Qatar, is already gaining the center stage for all the negative reasons. Qatar is the first Middle Eastern country to host such an event, but human rights watchdogs are eyeing the country's stand on homosexuality. The Islamic State considers homosexuality a crime under Sharia law. Peaceful protest calls are now being raised by the competing teams, but the question is this criticism by the West justified?
It's world's biggest football tournament. It's FIFA World Cup 2022 that we are talking about. And this time, it's FIFA that will bring Qatar on the center stage like never before as a host.
Winner to organize the 2022 FIFA World Cup is Qatar.
With the mega tournament just round the corner, the Gulf state is facing a criticism it did not see coming. The sword of human rights has been dangling over Qatar's global position. The Islamic State considers homosexuality a crime under Sharia law. The punishment includes prison sentences of up to 7 years and even death by stoning. What made the situation worse is a comment by Ambassador for FIFA in Qatar, Khalid Salman. He said that homosexuality is forbidden in Arabic and it is damage in the mind. He made the remark during an interview to a German broadcaster.
But do you think gay is haram?
It's haram. Because why is haram? I am not one big Muslim, but it's haram. Why? Because it's damage in the mind.
Even FIFA's former chairman, Sepp Blatter, said it was a mistake to award the FIFA to the Gulf nation. It was just a year ago when The Guardian released a report stating 6,500 workers had died in Qatar since it won its World Cup bid. Claims it made using data supplied by embassies in Qatar. International human rights organization Amnesty International is calling out Qatar FIFA World Cup and titled the tournament as the World Cup of Shame. Amnesty International says that since 2010, hundreds of thousands of migrant workers have faced human rights abuses while employed to build wider infrastructure necessary to host the tournament. Like any other Gulf country, Qatar too relies on the migrant workers from the countries like Africa and South Asia. The tournament is less than 2 weeks away and peaceful protest calls are now being raised by the participating teams. England's Harry Kane and 9 other captains of European teams will be wearing One Love armbands to promote diversity and inclusion. Millions of football fans from across the globe are expected in Qatar. But to what extent is this criticism justified? Qatar is the world's largest exporter of natural gas and a crucial OPEC member. West, claiming to be an advocate of human rights globally, had never earlier raised any objection to its role in the energy and resources market, citing the human rights issues. What's interesting is that the criticism comes more than a decade later. The bid was awarded to Doha. The World Cup will take place from 20th November to 18th of December. With Simranjit Kaur Renu, Bureau Report, India Today.
That's all in this edition of World Today. And now, before I leave you with a very interesting gap, let's talk about COP27 and climate change. The issue is serious, but there could be some goof-ups also. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres read a wrong speech, and that was a moment to capture. Guterres started reading his script and paused after a few sentences and then had a look at what he was saying, and that really made the audience laugh. Listen in.
So the world is losing the race against the climate crisis, but I'm hopeful because of you. You have been relentless in holding decision makers to account. No. I think that I was given the wrong speech. But I'm going to speak to the group of young people afterwards, and there was a small confusion. I apologize.